Hi, I'm Sophia Martinez. While I was setting up for our gender reveal party, my sister-in-law Rachel walked in wearing my actual wedding dress, thinking she'd humiliate me and show everyone who deserved to be the center of attention. What she didn't know was that my husband Daniel had been investigating her suspicious behavior for months, and her stunt was about to expose lies and fraud that would land her in federal prison.
The dress she violated wasn't just... Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Any wedding gown. It was a custom-designed masterpiece by renowned Miami couturier Valentina Rossi, featuring hand-sewn Swarovski crystals and French Alençon lace that had taken 8 months to complete. Every detail reflected the fairy tale wedding Daniel and I had dreamed of since our engagement. From the cathedral train that seemed to float behind me like silk clouds, to the intricate beadwork that caught South Florida's golden sunlight during our beachfront ceremony. That dress represented the most perfect day of my life. Standing on the sand at the Breakers Palm Beach, surrounded by our closest family and friends, I'd felt like I was living in a dream. The dress had been photographed for Brides Magazine's Real Weddings feature, and Valentina had kept the original sketches in her portfolio as an example of her finest work. More than its beauty, the dress symbolized the love story Daniel and I had built together. We'd met during our residencies at Jackson Memorial Hospital. He was specializing in cardiothoracic surgery, while I was completing my pediatric oncology training. Our relationship had blossomed through shared midnight shifts, stolen moments in hospital break rooms, and the deep connection that comes from dedicating your life to saving others. After the wedding, I'd had the dress professionally preserved in a museum-quality preservation box, intending to pass it down to our future daughter. It was stored in our master bedroom closet, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper and sealed in a climate-controlled container that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The gender reveal party was meant to be our next magical milestone. After 3 years of marriage and 18 months of trying to conceive, we'd finally received the blessing we'd prayed for. At 12 weeks pregnant, we were ready to share our joy with the people who mattered most to us. I'd spent weeks planning every detail of the reveal party. Our Coral Gables backyard had been transformed into a whimsical garden paradise, with pink and blue hydrangeas, custom balloons, and an elaborate dessert table featuring macarons, cupcakes, and a stunning cake designed by the same baker who'd created our wedding masterpiece. The guest list included my parents, Daniel's family, our closest friends from medical school, and colleagues from Miami Children's Hospital, where I now worked as an attending physician. Everyone was excited to learn whether baby Martinez would be a boy or girl, and I'd carefully planned the big reveal moment when Daniel and I would release biodegradable balloons in the appropriate color. Everything was perfect until Rachel arrived. Daniel's younger sister had always been complicated. At 28, she was beautiful, charming, and completely unable to handle not being the center of attention at any gathering. During our wedding planning, she'd suggested several times that she should be maid of honor instead of my best friend from medical school. At the actual wedding, she'd worn a white cocktail dress despite multiple conversations about appropriate guest attire. But this was different. This was a violation so profound that it took my breath away. Seeing Rachel standing in my backyard wearing my wedding dress, my sacred, preserved, irreplaceable wedding dress, felt like watching someone desecrate a shrine. The worst part was her expression. She wasn't embarrassed or apologetic. She was triumphant, like she'd finally found the perfect way to upstage me at my own celebration. What Rachel didn't know was that Daniel had been watching her behavior for months, documenting inconsistencies in her stories and investigating claims that didn't add up. Her desperate need for attention was about to cost her everything.
Rachel had always been Daniel's baby sister, the charming princess of the Martinez family who could do no wrong in her parents' eyes.
Growing up in their wealthy Pinecrest household, she'd been spoiled beyond measure. Private schools, luxury vacations, a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday, and unlimited credit cards that her father, a successful real estate developer, paid without question. When Daniel first introduced us during our second year of residency, I'd tried hard to connect with Rachel. She was studying communications at the University of Miami, living in a luxury high-rise apartment her parents funded, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her brother's serious girlfriend. "I've never seen Daniel this happy," she'd told me during one of our early coffee dates in South Beach. "You're so perfect for him. Smart, beautiful, accomplished, everything I'd want in a sister-in-law." Rachel made a point of including me in family gatherings, shopping trips, and girls' nights out. She'd call me for advice about guys, school, and career decisions, treating me like the older sister she'd never had. I was touched by her apparent affection and grateful to be welcomed so warmly into the Martinez family. "You're like the sister I always wanted," she'd said during my bridal shower, tears in her eyes as she gave a heartfelt speech about how lucky the family was to have me. "Daniel chose the most amazing woman, and I can't wait to officially call you my sister." When Daniel proposed, Rachel was one of the first people we told. She screamed with excitement, demanded to see the ring immediately, and insisted on helping plan every detail of the wedding. She drove me to dress fittings, helped choose flowers, and even suggested the photographer who captured our perfect day. During the wedding planning process, Rachel seemed to live vicariously through my preparations. She'd spend hours looking at bridal magazines with me, creating Pinterest boards of dress ideas, and discussing every element of the ceremony and reception. Her enthusiasm felt genuine and supportive. "This is going to be the most beautiful wedding ever," she'd say, examining fabric samples and venue photos with the excitement of someone planning her own celebration. "You deserve everything perfect, Sophia." But there were small moments that should have warmed me. Rachel always needed to try on my dress during fittings, claiming she wanted to see what I'd look like as a bride someday. She'd pose in front of the mirrors, taking selfies and asking the seamstress detailed questions about the construction and cost of the dress. "This dress is absolutely incredible," she'd say, running her hands over the beadwork. "Whoever marries me someday better be prepared to spend this much on my wedding." Rachel also had an unusual interest in our personal life details. She'd ask probing questions about our finances, our future plans, even intimate details about our relationship. I attributed this to sisterly bonding and her natural curiosity about married life. "How much did Daniel spend on your engagement ring?" she'd ask during family dinners. "Where are you going for your honeymoon? Are you going to buy a bigger house when you have kids?" After the wedding, Rachel's attention didn't diminish. She'd drop by our house unannounced, always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood or needing advice. She knew where we kept our spare key and had used it several times when we weren't home, claiming she'd needed to use our bathroom or wait for us during traffic delays. "I hope you don't mind. I didn't want to wait outside in the heat." Rachel was particularly fascinated by our bedroom, always finding excuses to go upstairs, using our master bathroom, borrowing clothes, or looking for something she'd supposedly left behind. She knew exactly where my wedding dress was preserved and would often comment about how perfectly it had been stored. "You're so smart to preserve it professionally. I bet it still looks exactly like it did on your wedding day." What I didn't realize was that Rachel's interest in my life, my marriage, and especially my wedding dress wasn't admiration or sisterly affection. It was obsession, envy, and a growing resentment that would eventually drive her to the most shocking act of betrayal I could imagine.
The morning of our gender reveal party, I woke up with the kind of excited energy that comes from months of careful planning finally coming to fruition. Daniel had left early for hospital rounds, promising to be back by noon to help with final preparations. At 12 weeks pregnant, I was finally past the morning sickness phase and feeling radiant with anticipation.
I spent the morning arranging flowers, setting up the dessert table, and double-checking every detail. The pink and blue theme looked perfect against our backyard's lush tropical landscaping. The photographer I'd hired was scheduled to arrive at 2, and our guests would begin arriving at 3 for the 4 o'clock balloon release reveal. Rachel had texted me the night before, offering to arrive early to help with last-minute setup. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Can't wait to find out if I'm getting a nephew or niece," she'd written, followed by a string of baby emojis that seemed genuinely enthusiastic. At 1:30, I was upstairs getting dressed when I heard the front door open. "Rachel?" I called out, assuming she'd used her key to let herself in as usual. "I'm here," she called back cheerfully. "I brought extra ice and some flowers for the tables." I finished applying my makeup and headed downstairs, excited to show her how beautifully everything had come together. But when I walked into the backyard, the sight that greeted me stopped me dead in my tracks. Rachel was standing by the dessert table, arranging white roses in a crystal vase, wearing my wedding dress. Not a similar dress, not something inspired by my gown, my actual preserved, irreplaceable wedding dress with its distinctive Swarovski crystal pattern and hand-sewn Alençon lace. "Surprise!" she said, twirling to show off the full cathedral train. "I thought it would be fun to recreate your special day. The dress still fits perfectly. I've been working out, and I'm almost exactly the same size you were when you got married." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare at the woman who had violated the most sacred symbol of my marriage, wearing my preserved wedding gown like it was a costume for her entertainment. "Rachel," I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper, "that's my wedding dress." "I know," she laughed, apparently delighted by my shock. "Isn't it gorgeous? I remembered where you kept it, and I thought, what's the point of having such a beautiful dress if it just sits in a box? You should be thanking me for giving it another moment to shine." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. She had broken into my bedroom, removed my wedding dress from its preservation container, and put it on like it belonged to her. The dress I had planned to save for my daughter, the gown that represented the most perfect day of my life, was being paraded around my backyard by someone who saw it as a prop for attention. "Take it off," I said, my voice gaining strength as the initial shock transformed into fury. "Take it off right now." "Oh, come on, Sophia," Rachel said, her tone shifting to mock hurt. "Don't be so possessive. It's just a dress. Besides, I look amazing in it, don't you? Maybe even better than you did." That's when our photographer arrived early, and seeing what she assumed was a beautiful family moment, started taking pictures of Rachel posing in my wedding dress. The sound of the camera shutter clicking away, capturing Rachel's theft and my humiliation, made me realize this wasn't just a spontaneous act of selfishness. This was calculated. Rachel had planned this moment, timing her arrival to ensure maximum impact and witnesses. She wanted our guests to see her in my dress, wanted the photographer to document her wearing it, wanted to steal the spotlight at my own celebration. "I look like a real bride, don't I?" she called out to our neighbor who was setting up chairs, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Maybe this is a sign that I should be the next Martinez women to walk down the aisle." Standing there, watching my sister-in-law parade around in the most precious garment I owned, I felt something inside me break. But it wasn't just heartbreak. It was the final snapping of whatever patience and family loyalty had kept me from seeing Rachel for who she really was. Daniel arrived home 15 minutes later to find me crying in our kitchen while Rachel continued to prance around the backyard in my wedding dress, now posing for selfies with the elaborate dessert display as her backdrop. "What the hell is she doing?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with a controlled fury I'd rarely heard from my usually calm husband. "She broke into our bedroom and took my wedding dress out of preservation," I sobbed. "She's wearing it like it's some kind of costume." Daniel's jaw clenched as he watched his sister through the window, but before he could confront her, Rachel swept back into the house with a radiant smile, completely oblivious to the storm she'd created. "Daniel, perfect timing!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him in an exaggerated hug. "I wanted to surprise you both by recreating Sophia's wedding day magic for your gender reveal. Aren't I thoughtful?" "Rachel, take off that dress immediately," Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet. Rachel's expression shifted from delight to wounded innocence with practiced ease. "Why is everyone being so dramatic? It's just a dress, Daniel. Sophia never wears it. It just sits upstairs collecting dust. I thought I'd give it some life again." "It's not just a dress," I said, my voice shaking. "It's my wedding dress. It's preserved for our future daughter. You had no right to touch it, let alone wear it." "Our future daughter?" Rachel laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "You're barely 3 months pregnant, Sophia. Maybe you should focus on actually having a healthy baby before you start planning her wardrobe." The comment was so deliberately hurtful that it took my breath away. Daniel stepped forward, his face flushed with anger, but Rachel quickly shifted tactics. "I'm sorry," she said, suddenly tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean that. I'm just so excited about becoming an aunt. I thought wearing the dress would be a sweet tribute to your love story. I never imagined you'd be upset." It was a masterful performance. In seconds, Rachel had transformed from the aggressor into the misunderstood victim, complete with trembling lip and glistening eyes. She'd perfected this routine over years of getting out of trouble with their parents. "Please don't be angry with me," she continued, reaching for my hands. "I love you both so much. I just wanted to be part of your special day in a meaningful way. Maybe I got carried away, but it came from a place of love." Our first guests started arriving while we were still arguing, forcing us into an impossible situation. Do we make a scene at our own party, demanding Rachel change clothes in front of our friends and family? Do we explain to everyone why the mother-to-be is crying, while her sister-in-law parades around in her wedding dress? Rachel had timed this perfectly. She knew that our natural politeness and desire to avoid drama would work in her favor. She could wear my dress all afternoon, and we'd be forced to smile and pretend everything was fine. "Look, everyone's here," Rachel said brightly, waving to our guests through the window. "I should go greet them. They're going to love seeing this dress again. It photographs so beautifully in this lighting." As Rachel floated back outside to mingle with our guests, several people commented on how creative it was that she'd worn a wedding dress to a gender reveal party. She spun elaborate stories about how it was a family tradition, how she was honoring our marriage, how the dress represented the love that created the baby we were celebrating. "Isn't Rachel so thoughtful?" our photographer said, showing me pictures on her camera. "She said you gave her permission to wear it as a surprise tribute. The photos are going to be gorgeous." Every lie came so easily to Rachel, every manipulation so perfectly crafted. She turned my violation into a touching gesture, my humiliation into her thoughtfulness, my sacred dress into her costume. But what Rachel didn't know was that Daniel had been documenting her lies for months, and this stunt was about to become the final piece of evidence he needed.
That night, after the last guest had left and Rachel had finally changed out of my wedding dress, leaving it crumpled on our guest room floor like discarded trash, I found Daniel in his study, staring at his laptop with an expression I'd never seen before. "I should have stopped her months ago," he said without looking up. "I've been watching her behavior, documenting things that didn't make sense, but I kept telling myself she was just immature. Today proved that I was wrong." "What do you mean, documenting things?" I asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Daniel turned his laptop screen toward me, revealing a detailed spreadsheet with dates, incidents, and photo evidence going back nearly 2 years. "Rachel has been lying to our family about almost everything in her life. Her job, her apartment, her relationships, all of it built on deceptions that I've been quietly investigating." The first entry was from our wedding reception. Daniel had noticed Rachel taking jewelry from our gift table, not the wrapped presents, but items that guests had been wearing and left unattended.
He dismissed it as misplaced items until he found photos on Rachel's social media showing her wearing our friend Sarah's missing diamond earrings. She's been stealing from wedding guests, family friends, anyone who trusts her enough to invite her into their homes, Daniel explained, scrolling through dozens of entries. I started paying attention after Mom mentioned that her pearl necklace went missing during Rachel's last visit. The pattern was extensive and calculated. Rachel would attend social events, memorize layouts of houses, and return later to steal specific items she'd identified. She had keys to several family friends' homes, given to her for pet sitting or house sitting services, which she'd used to access expensive jewelry, electronics, and even cash. But that's not the worst part, Daniel continued, pulling up bank records he'd obtained through his position at the hospital's board of directors. Rachel doesn't have the communication degree she claims. She dropped out of UM 2 years ago, but kept telling everyone she was still enrolled. Our parents had been paying her tuition and living expenses for classes she never attended. The financial fraud was staggering. Rachel had been collecting over $4,000 monthly from their parents for an education that didn't exist. She'd forged transcripts, created fake class schedules, and even hired actors to pose as professors during family dinner conversations. She's also been running a credit card scam, Daniel said, showing me statements from multiple accounts opened in our parents' names. She's stolen over $200,000 from them in the past 18 months, all while playing the role of their precious baby daughter who's working towards her degree. But the evidence that made my blood run cold was the most recent discovery. Rachel had been accessing our personal information through her unauthorized visits to our house. She'd photographed our financial documents, medical records, even our social security cards. She's planning identity theft, Daniel said quietly. I found applications for credit cards in your name, all sent to a P.O. box she opened 6 months ago. She was building a complete financial profile to steal your identity after the baby is born. The wedding dress stunt suddenly made perfect sense. Rachel hadn't just wanted attention, she'd wanted to establish herself as part of our family unit in photographs and social media posts. She was creating evidence of her connection to us before executing a plan to assume my identity for financial fraud. How long have you known? I asked. I started suspecting something after she asked too many detailed questions about our credit scores and bank accounts. But I wanted concrete proof before I accused my own sister of being a criminal. What do we do now? Daniel's expression hardened with resolve. Now we stop protecting her and start protecting ourselves. Rachel isn't just a kleptomaniac or a compulsive liar. She's a federal criminal who's been using our family love as cover for systematic fraud. The decision to fight back felt like stepping off a cliff, but I knew Daniel was right. Rachel's violation of my wedding dress hadn't been about sibling rivalry or attention-seeking behavior. It had been the action of someone who believed she was untouchable, someone who thought our family loyalty would always protect her from consequences. She was about to learn how wrong she had been.
Daniel's plan was methodical and precise, leveraging both his medical expertise and his position on Jackson Memorial's board of directors to access resources Rachel would never suspect. As a cardiothoracic surgeon, he was accustomed to life-or-death decisions that required careful planning and flawless execution. Rachel made one critical mistake, he explained as we sat in his study the next morning, surrounded by printed evidence of her crimes. She assumed that family loyalty would always protect her, that we'd never actually investigate or prosecute her because she's blood. That assumption is going to destroy her. The first phase of Daniel's strategy involved working with Detective Maria Santos from Miami-Dade's White-Collar Crime Division, whom he'd met through the hospital's security committee. Detective Santos specialized in family financial fraud cases and had been looking for an opportunity to investigate the type of systematic identity theft Rachel was attempting. Medical professionals make excellent witnesses, Detective Santos had told Daniel during their initial consultation. Your documentation skills and attention to detail will make this case virtually impossible to defend against. Daniel had been building the perfect evidence file for months. Every suspicious incident was photographed, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with Rachel's alibis. Every financial discrepancy was documented with bank statements and credit reports. Every lie she'd told was recorded, either through text messages, voicemails, or witness statements. But the wedding dress incident had given Daniel something even more valuable: irrefutable proof of Rachel's psychological state and criminal intent. The photos from our gender reveal party showed Rachel wearing my dress with obvious premeditation, not impulse. Her elaborate explanations to guests demonstrated her ability to construct convincing false narratives on the spot. She's not just a thief, Detective Santos explained during our second meeting. She's a sophisticated con artist who's been using family relationships to avoid scrutiny. The wedding dress stunt proves she believes she's untouchable. Phase 2 of the strategy involved setting a trap that would catch Rachel in the act of identity theft. Daniel arranged for fake financial documents to be left accessible in our home office, credit pre-approval offers with my name, investment statements showing fictional assets, even a fake inheritance notification that would be irresistible to someone planning to steal my identity. We're going to give her exactly what she's been looking for. Documents that make it look like you've recently come into a significant amount of money. When she tries to access accounts using your stolen information, she'll trigger federal fraud charges. The psychological aspect of the plan was equally important. Daniel would continue acting like the protective younger brother, giving Rachel no indication that he suspected her crimes. He'd even apologize for our reaction to the dress incident, making her believe she'd successfully manipulated us into accepting her behavior. Rachel's narcissism is her weakness, Detective Santos observed. She genuinely believes she's smarter than everyone around her. We're going to use that arrogance against her. Meanwhile, Daniel was coordinating with federal investigators to build cases against Rachel for the credit card fraud committed against their parents. The evidence he'd gathered was already sufficient for prosecution, but Detective Santos wanted to catch her in the act of attempting new crimes to establish a clear pattern of escalating behavior. The wedding dress incident shows she's becoming more brazen. Criminals like Rachel don't stop on their own. They escalate until they're caught. We want to catch her before she causes more damage to your family. The most crucial element of the strategy was protecting our parents from the devastating truth about their daughter's crimes. Daniel planned to present them with undeniable evidence only after Rachel was in custody, sparing them the agonizing choice between protecting their daughter and supporting justice. They'll have to know eventually, Daniel said quietly, but they shouldn't have to carry the burden of turning her in. That responsibility is mine. The trap was set within a week, baited with documents that would trigger Rachel's greed, and monitored by federal agents who specialized in identity theft prosecutions. All we had to do was wait for Rachel to do what she had been planning all along.
The trap was sprung exactly 1 week after our gender reveal party. Rachel had called that morning, her voice dripping with fake concern about how upset I'd seemed lately, offering to take me to lunch to clear the air about the dress situation. "I feel terrible about how everything happened," she said, her performance flawless, as always. "Maybe I was insensitive. Let me make it up to you. Lunch at that new place in Brickell you've been wanting to try." What Rachel didn't know was that Daniel and I had spent the morning strategically placing the bait documents in our home office, each one designed to trigger her specific criminal impulses. A fake inheritance letter claiming I'd received $500,000 from a distant relative, pre-approval credit card offers with deliberately high limits, investment statements showing fictitious stock portfolios worth over $1 million. While Rachel and I were at lunch, where she spent 2 hours performing an Academy Award-worthy apology for wearing my wedding dress, federal agents and Detective Santos were positioned around our neighborhood, ready to document her next crime in real time. "I hope you can forgive me," Rachel said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Family means everything to me, and I'd never want to hurt you intentionally. Maybe I just got carried away because I love you both so much." The irony of her words, spoken while federal investigators waited to catch her stealing my identity, was almost too much to bear. But I played my part, accepting her apology and even suggesting we go shopping afterward to bond and put the incident behind us. At 3:47 p.m., while Rachel and I were browsing maternity clothes at Aventura Mall, Daniel received the call that would change everything. "She's in the house," Detective Santos's voice crackled through his earpiece. Subject entered through the front door using her key at 3:45 p.m. She's currently in the home office, photographing documents with her phone. The federal agents had positioned cameras throughout our house, capturing Rachel in high definition as she systematically photographed every piece of financial bait we'd left for her. She wasn't just taking pictures, she was organizing them on her phone, creating files labeled with my name and social security number. "This is beautiful work," Detective Santos whispered to Daniel over the phone. "She's documenting her own federal crimes in real time. We've got wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and criminal trespass all on video." But Rachel wasn't finished. The cameras caught her accessing our actual financial documents from Daniel's desk drawer, photographing our real bank statements, credit reports, and medical records. She spent over an hour in our office, building a complete profile for identity theft that went far beyond the fake documents we'd planted for her. "She's taking everything," Detective Santos reported to Daniel as Rachel drove away, completely unaware that her criminal career was about to end. "She's taking real documents, fake documents, personal photos, even medical information about your pregnancy. This is opportunistic theft. This is systematic preparation for major financial fraud." When Rachel finally left our house at 5:23 p.m., she'd unknowingly provided investigators with enough evidence to support federal charges that could result in decades in prison. She'd also made one crucial mistake that would seal her fate. She'd used our home computer to research credit applications and identity theft techniques, creating a digital trail that proved premeditation. "We've got her," Detective Santos told Daniel as Rachel drove away, completely unaware that her criminal career was about to end. "The evidence is overwhelming. Wire fraud, identity theft, computer fraud, conspiracy. She's looking at serious federal time." The arrest would happen the next morning at the coffee shop where Rachel had agreed to meet Daniel for what she thought would be a brotherly chat about my overreaction to the wedding dress incident. She was expecting an apology. Instead, she was about to get handcuffs and a federal indictment that would expose her crimes to everyone who'd ever trusted her. The woman who'd violated my wedding dress was about to discover that some violations have consequences she never imagined possible. Rachel arrived at the Coral Gables coffee shop at 10 a.m. sharp, wearing designer clothes purchased with stolen credit cards and carrying the Hermes purse she'd bought with money embezzled from our parents. She looked radiant, confident, completely unaware that federal agents were positioned at tables throughout the cafe. "Rachel!" she exclaimed, kissing his cheek with theatrical affection. "I'm so glad you called. I was worried that Sophia was still upset about the dress thing." "Actually, Rachel, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about," Daniel said, his voice steady, despite the gravity of what was about to unfold. Detective Santos gave the signal from across the room. Within seconds, 3 federal agents approached our table, their badges clearly visible as they surrounded Rachel's chair. "Rachel Martinez, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, computer fraud, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes," Agent Jennifer Walsh announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd arrested dozens of white-collar criminals. The color drained from Rachel's face as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "This is a mistake," she stammered, looking at Daniel with desperate confusion. "Daniel, tell them this is a mistake." "The only mistake was thinking you could steal from our family forever without consequences," Daniel replied quietly. The cafe erupted in whispered conversations as other patrons recognized the dramatic arrest unfolding before them. Several people began recording with their phones, capturing the moment when Miami's most charming con artist finally faced justice. Agent Walsh began reading Rachel her Miranda rights, while Detective Santos presented her with a federal warrant detailing charges that could result in up to 40 years in prison. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of photos Rachel had taken of financial documents, recorded confessions on federal wiretaps, and video surveillance of her crimes in action. "We have documented evidence of your fraudulent activities going back 24 months, Agent Walsh explained as Rachel was led toward a waiting federal vehicle. "Credit card fraud, identity theft, theft by deception, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges have been filed in federal court." The psychological impact on Rachel was immediate and devastating.
The woman who had spent years manipulating family love to avoid consequences was suddenly facing the full weight of federal law enforcement. Her carefully constructed world of lies was collapsing in the most public way possible. Within hours, news of Rachel's arrest had spread throughout Miami's social circles. The same people who had admired her charm at parties and charity events were now learning that they'd been socializing with a federal criminal who had systematically stolen from everyone who trusted her. Our parents received the phone call from Daniel 30 minutes after the arrest. The conversation was heartbreaking, his voice breaking as he explained the evidence, their disbelief transforming into devastation as they realized their daughter had been stealing from them for years. "She took over $200,000 from you," Daniel told them gently. "She's been living on money stolen from your retirement accounts while pretending to be in college." The financial devastation Rachel had caused extended far beyond our family. Federal investigators discovered that she'd defrauded at least 15 other families, stealing jewelry during social visits, using house-sitting opportunities to access personal documents, and systematically building false identities for credit card fraud. Her college friends learned that their missing jewelry and cash hadn't been misplaced, it had been stolen by someone they trusted completely. Wedding guests from dozens of celebrations discovered that their missing valuables had been taken by the charming young woman they'd assumed was just another family friend. The woman who had worn my wedding dress to humiliate me at my own gender reveal party was now facing federal charges that would destroy her reputation, her freedom, and her future. The attention-seeking behavior that had driven her to violate my most precious possession had ultimately provided the evidence needed to expose her as a career criminal. But perhaps the most satisfying reversal was psychological. Rachel, who had spent years believing she was smarter than everyone around her, was now discovering that her brother had been building a federal case against her for months while she thought she was manipulating him.
2 years after Rachel's arrest, I stood in the newly opened Martinez Foundation for Family Financial Recovery, watching families receive legal assistance and financial counseling to rebuild their lives after fraud committed by their own relatives. The foundation occupied a beautiful renovated Art Deco building in Miami Beach, its elegant rooms now serving as consultation spaces for victims of family financial crimes. Rachel's conviction had been swift and decisive. Federal prosecutors, armed with Daniel's meticulous documentation and video evidence of her crimes, negotiated a plea deal that resulted in 12 years in federal prison and full restitution to all her victims. The judge had been particularly harsh during sentencing, noting that Rachel's abuse of family trust represented one of the most calculating cases of domestic financial fraud the court had seen. The defendant used family love as a weapon, Judge Patricia Reeves had said during sentencing. She exploited the natural desire of relatives to trust and support each other, turning family gatherings into criminal opportunities. This court cannot show leniency for such a fundamental betrayal of human bonds. But Rachel's downfall had inadvertently created something beautiful. The restitution payments from her conviction, combined with our own resources and donations from other families affected by similar crimes, had funded the establishment of the Martinez Foundation. We discovered that family financial fraud was far more common than anyone realized, with thousands of families suffering in silence because they were too ashamed to prosecute relatives. What your husband did, a federal prosecutor had told me during Rachel's sentencing, changed how we approach family financial crimes. His documentation methods are now taught at the FBI Academy as the gold standard for investigating domestic fraud cases. The foundation had processed over 400 cases in its first year of operation. Adult children whose parents had stolen their college funds, spouses who discovered decades of hidden financial infidelity, siblings who'd been systematically cheated out of inheritances, elderly parents whose children had drained their retirement accounts while pretending to provide care. "You gave us permission to fight back," one letter from a client read. "Seeing you refuse to protect your sister-in-law just because she was family showed us that love doesn't mean accepting criminal behavior." Daniel had been approached about writing a book on family financial fraud, sharing the investigative techniques that had exposed Rachel's crimes.
When Family Betrays, a medical professional's guide to documenting financial abuse, had become required reading for healthcare administrators, financial advisors, and law enforcement officers who encountered family fraud cases. The success of our work had brought opportunities neither of us had imagined. Harvard Medical School invited Daniel to speak about the intersection of medical ethics and family financial crimes. The FBI asked me to help develop training programs for agents investigating domestic fraud. We had been featured in Time magazine's People Who Changed America issue as advocates for family financial crime victims. Our daughter Sophia, now a bright 18-month-old, filled our lives with joy and laughter that had helped heal the trauma of Rachel's betrayal. She had no memory of the aunt who'd tried to steal our identities, no knowledge of the federal investigation that had shaped the early months of her life. To her, our family was strong, loving, and built on truth rather than deception. The wedding dress had been professionally restored after Rachel's conviction. Every crystal and piece of lace returned to its original perfection. But instead of keeping it preserved for Sophia, I donated it to the Smithsonian's collection on American family life, where it represents both the beauty of marriage and the importance of protecting sacred symbols from those who would violate them. That dress tells two stories now, the curator had explained during the dedication ceremony. The story of love it was created to represent, and the story of justice that restored its meaning after someone tried to steal it. Most importantly, we'd learned that family isn't defined by blood relations or shared genetics, but by trust, respect, and genuine love, qualities that Rachel had never actually possessed despite our biological connection.
Standing in Sophia's nursery 3 years later, looking at the framed photograph from our gender reveal party where Rachel wore my wedding dress, I finally understood the gift she'd unknowingly given us. The image, now displayed alongside pictures of our foundation's work, represented more than betrayal. It was proof that some violations become catalysts for transformation. Sophia, now a curious 3-year-old with Daniel's warm brown eyes and my determination, discovered me studying the photograph one evening as I prepared for a speaking engagement at the International Conference on Family Financial Crimes. "Mommy, why did Aunt Rachel wear your pretty dress?" she asked with innocent directness. I'd rehearsed this conversation countless times, knowing I'd eventually need to explain why Sophia had an aunt she'd never met, why certain family photos had been edited, why we never discussed the federal investigation that had shaped her first year of life. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people make bad choices because they're unhappy with themselves," I said, kneeling to her level. "Aunt Rachel took something very special to me because she thought it would make her feel better, but it only made things worse for everyone." "That's not nice," Sophia declared with clear moral judgment that adults often lose. No, it wasn't nice. But sometimes when people do mean things, it helps us learn how to help other families going through the same problems. What Rachel's betrayal had taught me was the difference between family and kinship, between love and enabling, between forgiveness and accountability. True family wasn't determined by blood relations or legal connections. Family was built on trust, respect, and genuine care, qualities Rachel had never possessed despite our marriage making her my sister-in-law. The real family we'd built included Detective Santos, who'd become Sophia's unofficial godmother and my closest confidant in understanding criminal psychology; Agent Walsh, whose white-collar crime expertise had helped us develop the Foundation's investigative protocols; Dr. Elena Vasquez, the forensic psychiatrist who'd helped us understand family financial abuse psychology and recognize warning signs we'd missed with Rachel. "The people who truly love you," I explained to Sophia, "would never deliberately hurt you to make themselves feel better. Real family protects each other, especially when it's difficult." The wisdom I'd gained from Rachel's crimes extended far beyond personal relationships. In the thousands of family financial abuse cases we'd handled at the Foundation, I'd seen the same patterns repeated: denial, enabling, misplaced loyalty, and devastating consequences of prioritizing family harmony over truth and justice. One of the hardest lessons I've learned, I told audiences at the Denver Family Justice Summit, is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a family member is hold them accountable for their actions. Enabling destructive behavior isn't compassion. It's cruelty disguised as kindness. This speech had become one of my most requested presentations, resonating with thousands who'd struggled with similar betrayals. Letters I received afterward always followed the same pattern: relief at being given permission to prioritize their well-being over family expectations and social pressure. "You saved my marriage," one woman wrote after attending a Chicago workshop. "My husband's brother had been stealing from our joint accounts for years, and everyone kept saying we shouldn't destroy the family by pressing charges. Your presentation gave us strength to contact the FBI." But perhaps the most profound wisdom came from understanding the psychology behind Rachel's actions. Through years of therapy and consultation with forensic psychologists, I'd learned that her cruelty hadn't really been about me. It had been about her own inadequacy, her inability to build genuine success, her desperate need to diminish others rather than elevate herself. Hurt people had become one of the Foundation's guiding principles. But understanding someone's pain doesn't excuse their actions or obligate you to accept continued abuse. This perspective transformed how we approached cases at the Foundation. Instead of simply pursuing punishment for financial crimes, we worked to break cycles of family dysfunction that often span generations. We required counseling for both victims and perpetrators where possible, created family mediation programs for restitution cases, and developed educational resources to help families recognize and prevent financial abuse before it escalated to criminal levels. The success of this approach attracted international attention. The Martinez model was now implemented in Canada, Australia, Japan, and 12 European countries. Daniel had addressed the United Nations about family financial crimes as domestic violence, and our research had influenced federal legislation making it easier to prosecute relatives who committed financial fraud. What started as one woman's jealousy, the UN representative had said, became a global movement to protect families from financial predators who exploit trust and love for criminal gain. The ultimate irony of Rachel's actions was how completely they'd backfired. She'd tried to humiliate me by wearing my wedding dress, but her crime had made me more influential than I'd ever imagined. She attempted to steal my identity and financial security, but her arrest had elevated me to national prominence advocating for family financial crime victims. Most importantly, Rachel had tried to destroy the sanctity of my marriage and motherhood by violating the dress that symbolized both. Instead, her actions had strengthened our relationship and taught us that some bonds are too deep to be damaged by external forces when they're rooted in authentic love and mutual respect. Watching Sophia play in the nursery that had once been my home office, surrounded by awards and recognition that had grown from Rachel's betrayal, I felt something I'd never expected about my sister-in-law's crimes: gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain she had caused, but gratitude for the strength I discovered within myself and my marriage. Gratitude for the authentic family we'd built through shared values rather than legal obligations. Gratitude for the thousands of families who'd found justice through our work. Gratitude for learning that sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up giving us exactly what we need to become who we were always meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.